Well, good morning and welcome to another week on my allotment. And what a weekend. I think it's called Storm Alex, I think. I don't quite know why they gave them names, but anyway, we had a hell of a couple of days. Really very, very windy. Lots of rain. Inches of rain, I would guess. Everywhere is soaked. I haven't brought my van round. I didn't want to risk it because I'm the only one up here. I'd be stuck. So, yeah, exactly the same as last year. I mean, we'll wait and see how it plays out. But last year, 1st of October, on the dot, the rain started. And it did not stop until March. I'm not sure we ever had... I think over Christmas, we went away for Christmas. And I think we had 3 or 4 days of overcast but dry weather. But other than that, it never stopped. Now, of course, we don't know how this winter's going to play out. But 1st of October, the rain arrived. And it's eased down now. But yesterday was a write-off. I did a little bit in the greenhouse. Yesterday I sowed my onion sets into trays. I always start them off in the greenhouse at home. So I've started off some red onions and some white onions. And I'm growing some more kale. All my kale that I planted at home was destroyed by caterpillars. So I'm trying to grow some more for the winter. We'll see how that goes. It might be a bit too late. And I'm also growing some more basil. But other than that, everything, excuse me, that I'm growing on the plot is overwintering. So I've got, well, we've still got butternut. I haven't really, there's a couple of butternuts on the shelf here, but haven't harvested those yet. The leaves are now dying down, so it won't be long. But I've got some parsnips, butternut, lots of leeks, which is good news. I've still got some potatoes in pots, main crop Sarpomera. The beetroot, Dechogia. Apart from giving some to my mum the other weekend, we haven't touched that yet. Oh, and lots of cabbage for the coleslaw. And I've still got some carrots in a tub here. So yeah, those are sort of generally accepted overwintering crops. I'm going to pull my first parsnips today. We're going to have a Sunday dinner tonight. We don't eat meat, but you know, in every other way, it's a conventional Sunday dinner, which I enjoy. So yeah, we really are now switched in. And it's interesting because we watched Gardener's World last night, and Monty Don said something that I thought was really quite interesting and true. And he said the 1st of October is the beginning of the year for gardening. And obviously what he means by that is next year. And the more I thought about that, I thought, yeah, that's true. It just so happened that was the day I planted my sets of onions, which are purely for the following year. Oh, and I've got some garlic. That's another one that's just reminded me. Again, just put in sets and, planted with a view to next year. So, yeah, I am, as Monty Don suggests, switching my focus to next year. And with that in mind, this rain has been interesting for me from the point of view of all my paths. And when I decided to raise the allotment off the ground to try and get out of the floodwater, the first thing I did, courtesy of one of my customers who got rid of a load of slabs, was I put slab paths down across the beds, and then I've got chipping path running the full length. And because I keep adding to the chippings paths, the slab paths acrossways are now a good 2-3 inches lower. So what I think I'm going to do is today I'm going to go and see if I can get some cardboard from the farm shop, and I'm going to relay some of the paths across are fine. They're not too bad at all. But some of them, like I say, are really low now. So, you step down onto them to cross across the plot. So I think I'll, put some more cardboard under them, more chippings, bring them up level with the chippings, and then relay them, and they'll lower with the long chipping path, if all that makes sense. But again, that's cosmetics really, albeit it's fundamentally important that I be able to move around my plot in the winter. You know, I'm not a seasonal gardener. I garden all year round, both in my garden up here. I think actually I would suggest that the plot is even more important to me in the winter because of this. You know, when was I up? I was up Friday afternoon, and it had been raining, but it wasn't raining, and I was getting some chippings from the pile, and Cheryl turned up, and she'd been and got some vegan sausage rolls from the farm shop, and she came up here. We came in here, we had a cup of tea and a cup of coffee, and it was lovely. The fire had been on for about 3 hours, so in here was beautiful, and she really appreciated it. You know, she had her coat done right up, so all you could see was that. It was cold. So we came in here for an hour and we chatted and we laughed and we had a lovely time. It's really special when she comes up. She doesn't come up often, so when she does, it's down tools in the shed. I give her a little tour because she doesn't watch these videos, and she has no idea what I'm doing on the plot, so she'd not seen that pallet fence. She'd not seen what I've done at the bottom, and neither of you, so we'll take you down there and have a look in a minute. And sorry if I'm waffling, but the other thing I've done this week is where all my paths are, I'm now under control of it. I've got a few sprigs of grass coming up here and there, you know, because the cardboard hasn't quite done its job, and that's fine, I can deal with that. But down at the bottom of the plot, where the compost heaps finish, I've got 2 old plastic Dalek compost bins, and I keep my bottles and a bit of membrane and stuff, you know, just stuff that it keeps it tidy. Well, I haven't bothered round there, and you know, over the summer the grass has grown about 3 feet high, and it's a sort of a no-go area because I can't see where I'm putting my feet. So over the last week, a little bit at a time, you know, I only get up here for an hour or 2 in the week, I've trimmed all the grass back, I've laid more cardboard, and I've cleared that. So I'm slowly stretching out the areas that I can now walk. So I can now walk down my centre path, around to the right of the back of the compost heaps, and around those 2 Dalek bins. And I'll show you in a moment, and it's now clear and it's chipped and it looks very neat and tidy, and I'm very happy with it. So what am I doing today? Well, I'm going to concentrate on these cross paths, get some more cardboard. There's nobody else up here, the weather is foul, but I've brought a lunch. Cheryl and I had a couple of nice breakfasts yesterday morning, and today's Sunday, and this morning. So we spent the whole of yesterday just mincing around the house, just, you know, pottering, and I had a few bits and pieces. Cheryl's always busy, you know what it's like with housewives, they never stop. She's always got something, ironing, hoovering, you know, constant. So it was just nice to spend the day together of a sorts, and today's back to a bit more normal, albeit no early start this morning because the rain was torrential this morning. It's easing off for this afternoon, I believe, but I'm still going to get wet. So that's enough waffle from me. Welcome along. I'll show you down the plot what I've done this week, and then we'll do a little bit more of my dad's life story. Well, I've tidied up the end of that path. That ends abruptly now, and it's been de-weeded and more cardboard put down. The pumpkin patch is all but finished. Got a couple of pumpkins still colouring up, but other than that, they're all up under my shelter and in the shed, keeping dry. But those pallets I've got off of Steve, and I'm going to use those as firewood over the winter in the shed. But this is the area I'm talking about. This was all overgrown, nettles, long grass about 3 feet high. You couldn't see the bottom of those apple trees, and I've tidied that up. So I'll walk through and show you how I can now, I've extended the neatness of the plot really. Yeah. emptied the leaf mould bin and top dressed, I think, 5 of the empty beds with a real thick mulch of rotted down leaves, and I shall leave that, and apart from weeding it occasionally, that's it till the spring. And yeah, very happy with how it's all looking. Whatever this rain does to me, I think my plot is ready. I'll try and show you what I mean about these paths. Oh, and the same customer that gave me the slabs on the paths has just given me these slabs, which I've lined along the edge of the compost heap, so as I'm digging the compost in and out, the detritus that drops doesn't fall into the chippings and can now be swept up. So that's just another cosmetic tidying process. But yeah, the butternuts. Oh, did you catch that on film? Blooming rat. He's in here somewhere. In inevitable part, I can hear him scurrying. Anyway, I'm afraid it's inevitable part of all allotments is rats. You just don't bump into them that often. I think they're in my compost heap, so I shall deal with that today as well. Enough said. But yeah, this is a good example of what I mean. I have to step down onto the slabs, so I'm going to take the opportunity to raise them. Here's another prime example. I could bring them slabs up about 4 inches. Anyway, that's the garlic. It's now come up. I think every one of them's come up, which I'm really pleased with. And then the latest leek. And just to show you just how much rain we've had, that's now overflowing. That was nearly empty. I couldn't reach the water by putting my arm in with a watering can. So yeah, we've had a fair drop of water. Yeah. Bearing in mind we're now well into autumn, I'm quite happy with how it looks. A little bit of cosmetic weeding needed, but other than that, I'm on top of it really. Okay, so a little bit more of my dad's life. At the time it seemed as if I had been going on the baker's round forever, but it was really just a short period compared to my next move. The moment I reached 13, the age by which in law youngsters can work, I got a paper round. Well, this was a regular wage, whereas with Dad it was tips or nothing. Little could I have guessed it would be another 8 years before I gave notice on that job. So he had a paper round for 8 years as a schoolboy. The paper round was at Gillingham Green, the one-time centre of Old Gillingham. It was where one of the busiest bus routes terminated, and on the way to work for many of the huge workforce of Chatham Royal Naval Dockyard, which at that time was thriving and popular. The owners were a lovely couple, Mr. and Mrs. Simmons, were getting on a bit, but disciplined and consistently cheerful, even inspiring against what today would be called a harsh life. They rose at 4:30, the shop opened at 5 o'clock, papers were delivered about then. Mr. Simmons would set off on his round, for many men left for work before 6. Mrs. set to and marked the papers for the imminent paper boys. All the while men were through the door for fags, fag papers, baccy and other odds and ends, and a paper. For those American cousins across the water, fags are what we call cigarettes. I know the word fags means something different in America. I've had that problem talking to American soldiers in my past. Yeah, fags are cigarettes. To start with, I had an evening round. It was well spread out, so my bike was essential. I was soon aware of the cardinal points of this new venture. It was essential that I got out of school on time, for I had to go to a big old shed near Gillingham High Street, which housed the printing press. The evening papers arrived from London by train early afternoon. were taken to the shed, and as racing results and other sporting highlights were known, these were printed on a blank column at the back page. As boys arrived, they were strict about the queuing order. Once papers were printed, I had to take Mr. Simmons' order to the shop, ready for the men to call in on their way home from work for their evening paper and the vital information on how their horses had done. I had a welcome cup of tea while Mrs. marked my papers for me. It was not long, however, before this wasn't necessary, but I still had my cup of tea. I kept up the evening round till I left school. It was pretty much routine apart from 2 deliveries. The first was to an elderly lady with 3 grown-up offspring, all of whom were mentally deficient to a greater or lesser degree. They had a Jack Russell dog. She would go berserk before I was anywhere near the house, and by the time I got there, the daughter had the dog in her arms, standing door open, waiting for me. He would grrr grrr at me. She would say, "Stroke him, he'll be all right once he gets to know you." Well, 3 years later, this pantomime was still being played out. With my pulse just about restored, I then came to Grench Manor, home to an eminent retired surgeon. The grand drive of the manor was about 100 metres. I had to deliver the paper to the cook, who sat at a low window at the side of the manor. Seeing me, she raised the window to take the paper. The surgeon had a wide-haired terrier. Every time the cook slammed the window down, a bark could be heard from the back of the manor, and he would quickly come charging round after me. I would mount and get up to speed as quickly as I could, and we raced off the 100 metres dash to the main road, him snapping at my ankle and me kicking out with evil intent. Again, this was played out every evening for 3 years, neither of us ever scoring a hit. At some point I concluded that everything in life is in balance. Things we think are good, sooner or later we find out there's also a downside. With respect to the grammar school, the paper round meant I could not afford to get noticed with any ability in sport, because it would mean after school commitments. Bit of a shame really. I loved swimming, running and rugby. The school had its own swimming pool, quite a rarity in the 1940s, and a massive sports field. My school, my junior school, had a swimming pool which we used to do. I got all my swimming badges, which were sewn on by my mum to my swimming trunks. I can remember doing the 1500 metres in the swimming pool. Completely, it was unheated. You can't imagine, can't imagine that today. An unheated swimming pool for children. Oh my goodness. They wouldn't even be allowed near water, it's dangerous. When the pool was filled up sometime in May from tap water, it was freezing. You were not forced to go in, but if you did, you got a house point, and another one if you went in naked. Again, you think about the kids today, naked. My little Johnny, naked. I was rather glad of the second option, as my only costume was knitted. It hung to my knees when wet. How embarrassing. Grammar school was also very much about homework. Lots of it, and so it quietly reduced my free time during terms, and so progressively I was backing off helping Dad with the animals and allotment. He must have adjusted too, as it was never a problem. I also gravitated away from playing in the street to cycling further afield, and particularly along the banks of the Medway. From where my ride along the sea wall started, just a bit further now, the river widened out into an estuary, and so I was always looking onto a patchwork of salt marshes and meandering channels, a dreary expanse of mud at low tide and an inviting maze of salt marshes at high tide. Whatever the reason, to me it was inviting. If only I had a boat. Just a couple of miles from home is the first creek suitable for mooring small craft, known as Sharp's Green. I also spent a large part of my childhood in and around Sharp's Green. I was to be drawn here for the rest of my teens. Slowly I made friends with like-minded youths and a couple of old-timers who I could listen to forever. I learnt a myriad of things about the river, tides, small boat and sailing. In the summer, with my new young friends all yearning to explore, but no boat, we swam from salting to salting all over the south side of the river, steering clear of the main channel, as the river was busy in those days with the Royal Navy dockyard at Chatham and wharfs at Chatham and Rochester. Anyway, it's another little glimpse of his life. And I think, you know, my dad is not, I'm sure he would agree, he was not exceptional in his childhood. He was doing what hundreds of other kids of his age were doing. They were out mucking about, getting dirty, playing, getting up to no good. Maybe I think perhaps he was a little bit exceptional with his ethos for work and money. But I think it's interesting because he's my father, and I think it's good to know how and where I come from and why I'm the way I am. But it's also interesting, and possibly more so, when you think about today's children. We don't get newspapers, but we used to. I mean, they mostly died now, but we used to have a group of elderly neighbours, and they got the newspaper. And the only time I've seen the newspaper delivered by a boy, a schoolboy, and he was in his mid-teens, I guess, he would walk up the road on a Sunday morning, and his dad, in a very large Mercedes car, would curb crawl along at his pace, and the newspapers were on the passenger seat, and his dad had the card of who got what newspaper on the steering wheel as he drove along in first gear. So this boy, who looked thoroughly uninterested, would walk along, and his dad would pass the newspaper out the open passenger door window and say number 16, and the boy would walk up, put the paper through, walk back in a sullenly manner. And so the dad's doing all the, that goes there and that goes where. He was just walking. Now, what is the point of that? You're not teaching him a work ethic because he's not working. He's just doing what he's told. You're not teaching him to stand on his own 2 feet because you're doing the card and working, and that's the best I've ever seen. So when you go from my dad's youth, where he was running out of school on the bike, dashing along, and everything was go, 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 to when I had a newspaper round most of my school life, as long, whenever you could get a newspaper round. Again, I guess that was 13, I don't remember. And I can remember, I had a bag with all the newspapers in, hung over my shoulder, and I'd have to ride with my handlebars like that to counterbalance this massive bag on my hip as I rode along. And obviously, as the paper round went on, slowly I could come up onto the level. From that to where we are now, where I've spoke to people who get their papers delivered, and they've been told by the shops they can't use children because they don't turn up. They're not reliable. Well, there was never any choice about me or my dad not turning up to do the paper round. It was a job. Anyway, I just find all that fascinating, of where we were to where we are now. Imagine if you asked a 16-year-old to write the life story of his life so far. What would it have in it? We went on holiday to Spain. I had an Xbox, and I got an Xbox 2. I just don't know what would be in it. Whereas my dad's is talking about being bombed with his 2-year-old sister at the Strand by a V2 bomber, possibly saving his mum's life when he pulled her back into the hallway, when he could hear the whistling of the bomb coming down and the shrapnel going into the path, of going into next door every night while the bombing went on. And then as soon as he could, he got a job. He bought his own secondary school uniform because his mum couldn't afford it, and he had savings. He'd already lived by his 16th birthday more than most people today live, full stop. I just find it a fascinating comment on social history. Anyway, I've waffled again long enough. I think the fire's now gone out, so I need to get that going again, and I'll get my first cup of tea, and then I'll get outside and do some work. Maybe. It's raining a bit harder now. Anyway, if you've got any memories of your childhood that would match, or of your parents, I'd love to see a comment. Or do you have a comment on, perhaps you think we've got it right with children today, that they don't go out, they're not, they're not exposed to danger like my dad was, relatively. Maybe you think that's a good thing. I don't know. I just think, you know, children are the poorer for the way they are cosseted and bubble wrapped today. You know, I mean, this present debacle with this virus, all they're talking about is kids' safety. Safety, safety, safety. Anyway, I'd be interested in what you think. Well, that's one little pathway done, and that set of slabs now are about 3 inches higher than they were before, sitting proud, so it can rain all it wants. I won't be getting my feet wet this year, he says, blindly optimistically. Well, I haven't done one of these red herrings and white elephants for a while, and I thought I'd do one. So, eating humble pie. It's a phrase we've all heard of, used to indicate somebody who has had to admit to being wrong in public, perhaps in humiliating fashion, and is looked down upon those once considered equal. This hierarchy was established during the medieval hunts and the subsequent banquets. During the feast, the lord of the manor and his peers would be served the finest cuts of venison, but the entrails and offal, known at the time as umbles, would be baked into a pie and served to those of a lower standing or out of favour. It was common practice for people to be humiliated by finding themselves sat at the wrong end of the table and being served umble pie. That's without the H, umble. In David Copperfield, the Charles Dickens novel, published in 1850, one of the characters, Uriah Heep, said, "I got to know what umbleness did, and I took to it. I ate umble pie with an appetite." That's how the phrase was popularised in Britain. And obviously it's sort of transmogrified into humble pie. But it actually was umble. Yeah, quite interesting. And quite interesting is what I'm hoping to find my next activity, because I'm going to go and dig up the first couple of parsnips of my year, and I have no idea what I'm going to find. So let's go and have a look. Well, I dug up 4. 3 are perfect and 1's a duffer. You know, I can live with that. Very happy with those. I'll make the coffee, put my little lid on it, and then while that's cooling a bit, I think I'll go out and cut out a few butternuts, and let's see what I've got, and let's find out if the rats have already made a start. Well, I've been through the bed and I've picked out these 22 butternuts. They're all a very good size. I'm thrilled to bits with the crop of butternut this year. It's worked out beautifully, and they're stunning looking plants, and Cheryl makes some wonderful meals. In fact, this morning we had, it's a butternut and baked bean stew, I think. She bakes it in the oven, and it was frozen butternut from last year. It's a beautiful meal. And so I know, you know, once we freeze them, like I say, we lost a few to rats last year. We won't have that again this year. I'm pleased to say there was no sign of any rat problem. So they're picked and they'll come home with me today. The van's all the way over there, so I shall have to wheelbarrow them over, but that's no problem. And I shall store them somewhere in and around our property. I probably won't be allowed them in the house. Bridget stores hers in her front porch. It's north facing, so it doesn't get direct sunlight on it, so it's really quite cool, and she manages to store them in there for a good 6 months or more. Not sure I'd be allowed to. I shall try it and I'll let you know how it goes. But anyway, yeah, very pleased. And my first crop of parsnips this year, and some carrots, and one of the last courgettes. The courgettes are sort of wrapping up for the year. So a lovely harvest. It's not all good news. I've got to report that some of them have split. That one's quite a bad example because it's such a big butternut, but I'm going to surmise that that is to do with water. We've had an extremely dry year, and despite the fact that I've tried to water them as heavily and as often as I could, I suspect that, you know, because I haven't been here all the time, or maybe I didn't water for a while and then I watered heavily, that, you know, that causes this splitting. And I'm not sure how much of this squash we will get as a result, because clearly, you know, I'll have to cut around all this. But, you know, that's life, isn't it? I've got 22 here. There's at least that many again still on the plot, waiting to be cut off in another couple of weeks or so. So I can't complain that a couple of them, and I think there's 3 here that have split, and then none of them are as bad as this one. So no complaints. Very happy. Didn't bring my watch today, and the van's all the way over there, so I can't switch the ignition on the van and have a look at the time on the dash. And of course I don't carry one of these horrible smartphones that everyone's got, so I'm stuffed. I have no idea what time it is. I'm guessing it's sort of mid to late afternoon, but you know, normally I'd use the stars and the sun, but there's neither of them available today. I'm joking, by the way, if you haven't worked that out. No rant this week. I got that off my chest last week. I feel better for it. And you know, there are plenty of people on YouTube who have ranting channels. I've thought of starting one up as an aside on my own, because you know, I've reached that stage in life where just about everything and anything makes me angry and frustrated. I guess it is an age thing. But anyway, yeah, I had my rant last week, and it was quite interesting. It sort of split my limited number of viewers. I had 3 people unsubscribed almost immediately. That may have been a coincidence, but I suspect not. I had about 3 or 4 really strong messages of support, which was lovely. Thank you for those. I had a couple of people ignore it, which is probably the best way to go. And then I had Faye Knights, who's always posts a comment of common sense and reason, said I should take up gardening, it might calm me down. That's a really good point. I thought that's, you know, that's what this was meant to do. When I left the forces, I was working in a Royal Navy establishment, heading up the army diving, and or the inspection of the teams at least. And the Navy guys I worked with, because they knew I was going to be a gardener, one of them wrote me a poem for my leaving do called The Angry Gardener. So it's no surprise, is it? But you know, this sort of thing should cause high emotion. You know, if you're sat at home going, well, I don't know, you know, that's a shame, because this is a pivotal moment in our life. We have given up so easily all our freedoms. And if you're sat at home thinking that those freedoms that have been taken away from us, you know, the government are now telling us who we can meet, how long we can meet them for, where we can meet them. They're telling us who and how we can have sex. That's, you know, that's, I never saw, you know, the government dictating how the members of the public can have sex. And if, you know, I won't go any further. You know, you think you're getting these liberties back, think again. Never in the history of society have freedoms been given back once they've been taken away. So if you think that the government's going to say, right, it's all over, folks, you can do what you like again, well, you're naive beyond belief. So yeah, I had my rant, and I'm not starting one now. But you know, my position in life is I look at things and I observe, but I try to stay away from things. You know, all the, you know, I've never lived in a city, so the terrible stabbings and crime that goes on in these cities nowadays doesn't affect me. I don't go there. I stay away from it. You know, you see these tragedies that happen on the news. You know, the fires in Australia, the fires in California. All of this stuff is away from me. It doesn't affect me, other than, you know, I feel some sympathy for the people that get caught up in these tragedies. I mean, you know, I've been in conflict a few times, so it's not as if I'm completely exempt from it, but this is the first time in my life that something has affected me so fundamentally, and I'm truly worried for the future. So yeah, it is a worry. Not the virus. The virus is a pretty routine, you know, infection of the respiratory tract. It's 6 times less of a killer at the moment than flu. In fact, no, flu's killing 10 times as many people in the last 15 weeks as coronavirus. So it's nothing special. It's not that worries me, it's the measures, what the government are doing to us and how long they'll be doing it, and what's coming down the road. And I might talk about that another time, but I think I know what's coming down the road. Anyway, I'm not here next week. We've got a week. We were going to have a week on in Snowdonia, but it's a 6-hour drive from here with our caravan, and the way, you know, these stupid unnecessary lockdowns are going at the moment. Because North Wales is sort of getting more and more of the lockdowns, and it was sort of creeping into the Snowdon area. And I thought, if they close campsites next week and we're it's a 6-hour drive back, we'd have wasted a lot of time and money. So we're going to Dartmoor, probably my favourite place in the British Isles, maybe with the exception of the Scottish Highlands. But yeah, so we're going to Dartmoor for a week, hopefully. Hopefully the government won't interfere with us. So I won't be able to post a video. I shall leave you for a week, and I shall post one when we get back. But thank you for joining me. If you've managed to work your way through all this, you've done well. So yeah, look after yourselves, and I will see you in just over, it's going to be, I think, nearly 2 weeks. Anyway, look after yourselves. See you soon. Bye for now.